Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
How we usually start the podcast is ask, what's your name? How many kids do you have? And what do you do for a living?
Okay. My name is Leanne Townsend. I am a family law lawyer, and I have two wonderful children, a son who's 24 and a daughter who's 22.
Very cool. So, did you always know you wanted to become a divorce lawyer?
No. I actually wanted to be a doctor for most of my childhood, and as I was getting older, I was realizing that I wasn't as strong in math and science. I was better in social studies and English, and so I was like, well, if I can't be a doctor, what's the next best job? And I was like, oh, I guess it's a lawyer. So that's how I became a lawyer, was that much thought that came into it. And I spent the first part of my career as an assistant Crown attorney. So I was doing criminal law, and then I got into family law about maybe 14, 15 years ago.
Oh, very awesome. So when you wanted to become a doctor, is it just something you wanted to do? Did your parents have an influence on that, or?
A little bit of both. I like helping people, and that's actually even what motivates me with law. I'm very motivated by helping people, have a good impact in their life, and that was motivating me to want to be a doctor. My dad was very driven, very ambitious, very money oriented, and so I was kind of raised that I had to pick a profession that you could make decent money at, and so I think that influenced me a bit with doctor versus maybe nurse or something like that. Although nurses nowadays can make really good money as well.
Yep.
But that definitely influenced me as well.
Do you feel like you studied a lot during high school? I guess at high school you needed to know what you were going to be.
I know, because when I went into university initially, I thought I was still going to be a doctor. It was really there that I made the decision that, I should switch paths and look at law. You do have to spend a lot of years in school, but I liked school. So to me, it wasn't a big deal. In fact, I was in school till I was 26, and
Okay.
I was good with that.
So when you were in high school, did you know you liked school, but you obviously had to get good marks to become a doctor or a lawyer?
Yes.
So did you have that in you where you were just studying all the time, or did you still go out and do, I guess, fun stuff?
I studied a lot. I was very motivated and driven. So, I still did some fun stuff, but I also was focused on doing well in school so that I'd be able to, keep my options open and pursue my goals.
Got it. Was that driven by you, or did somebody have to teach you how to be disciplined and motivated to do well in school?
I'd say it's a bit of both. My father was definitely a strong influence on me with respect to my career. So I think he did play a factor, but I was always from a young age, I was always motivated and always disciplined. I was always the kid who I had multiple jobs, even though I didn't need to for the money. I just felt like I have to have two summer jobs. I can't just have one. I have to have a full-time and a part-time one. And I was always the kind of kid who I would do my homework when I got home from school, and because I felt like I couldn't relax until I knew my work was done. And my brother was more the opposite. So that's why I can't say it's totally my upbringing, because I think there's just something in me.
That's cool. Yeah, I always wonder how much do I have to push my daughter when she gets older to be self-driven and stuff without kind of being too pushy?
Yeah, and I think it's a fine line, because with my own children, I've tried to do that, and I don't. My son is very driven; he works very hard, but my daughter is driven too. I think it's hard for her because both her dad and myself and her brother are all very driven and very hardworking. And so even though I think she's still those things, she's not maybe she likes to have more balance in her life. So I think sometimes she feels like she's being lazy, but she's not. She's still got her goals and everything.
That's basically how I feel. My brother and my sister both went to university. I eventually went back to get my degree as well in the same university, but I felt that for a good portion of my life as well.
Yeah.
So, you went to high school, you went to university. I guess you had to get an undergrad for 4 years. Was that?
Yeah, I did an undergrad at U of T in political science. When I decided that I wanted to go to law school, I knew that wasn't going to really matter what my undergrad was in. The important thing was to get good marks.
Okay.
So I picked political science. It was something I liked and I found I could have very well gone and got a PhD in political science and become a professor. Like I really enjoyed it, but I also did it because I knew I would get good marks in it. It was something I was good at. And then that way I'd, have a better application for law school.
Was it in Toronto?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you got your undergrad, then you took, was it 2 years back then?
My undergrad was 4 years.
And then after that,
I had to go to law school, and which was 3 years. And
Okay.
at that point, I wanted to get out of Toronto. So I went to Western in London and did my law degree there.
For those who are worried, does it make a difference where you go to school to get your
I
law
don't
degree?
think it does. I think any university in Canada is acceptable to a law school. The most important thing is your marks, and then you have to write something called the LSAT,
Okay.
which is a standardized test, and your score on the LSAT matters. It was a long time ago that I did this, so at least at that time, extracurriculars and things didn't really matter as much. Like you had to have bottom line, you had to have the marks. And if you didn't have the marks, unless you were like an Olympian or had something
Sure.
really that stood out in your extracurriculars, I don't think they really matter.
Good for you. That's awesome. Yeah, the LSAT. So I took a law course when I was getting my undergrad, and then I Googled like LSAT. I'm not good at those kind of things, but I'm very logical and know how to build like defense and arguments and finding evidence. But I don't think I would ever be able to pass that.
Yeah, it's something that I think you can only improve your scores so much by preparing. Now I did, because I'm driven and whatnot,
Yeah.
and I did, do a lot of preparation and practice, but I found my score from when I first started practicing to before I wrote it and when I actually wrote it, it might have gotten a little bit higher, but it wasn't a dramatic change. And there's one section of it, again, at least back then, called logical games.
Yeah.
And I was really, really good at that section. And a lot of people weren't. And so that really helped me because my score in that was always like really, really high. And so it just kind of helped overall with my overall score.
Cool. Is there any tips you would give any upcoming like law students on how to just be a good student?
I think treat school like almost like a job, in the sense like to do your homework, do the readings, stay on top of it. In those days, of course, you didn't have the option of doing courses online that you have now.
Yeah.
I tend to think when you have to go in person, you take it more seriously, and also you interact with your professor in person, you interact with other students. I think that's better than just doing things online, but I know there's some people that excel doing it that way. So you got to, I guess, know yourself and know what's right for you, but do the work and don't slack would be my,
Got it.
have fun, but also remember you're there for a reason to build a future for yourself.
So for those 3 years, did you spend pretty much all of your time studying?
No, I still had, time for fun and stuff. My situation was a little different than some people's because unfortunately my mother died when I was 19, and
sorry.
I was kind of thrown into a bit of a parental role with my younger brother and had to grow up kind of quickly. So I wasn't as into partying and things as other people my age because I was sort of older because of what had happened in my life. So I think for me, it was that maybe made it easier to just focus on school and do that because I was more mature in a sense.
Understandable. Did that have like a big impact, obviously, on you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest impact things in my life.
Got it. So I wanted to ask, when you got I guess obviously you passed, what is the next steps for somebody who just finishes their law degree? Do you go work for somebody?
So you have to do the bar admissions course, and it's changed since I did it. Like when I did it, it was like a 3-month course. I think you did a month, and then you had to go article somewhere at that time for a year, where you're kind of like an intern. You're paid, but you're like an intern, and then you went back and did the 3 months of the bar admissions course. I think now it's a little bit different. That the articling period I think is shortened, and they still have to do bar admissions, and then you write an exam in each subject area. So the idea is that every lawyer is kind of a generalist. So you're writing a bar exam in corporate law, in real estate law, in family law, in criminal law, I think constitutional law, and administrative. Like they cover the main areas. So you have to be proficient at least in all of those areas.
What's the time frame of all these like exams?
Gosh, like I don't know what it is now. Back then, I think it was. You had like just a few weeks in each course area. So it was intense. Like it was a full-time thing. You would go and do a class. I think the classes were, if I recall, they were like half a day maybe. And then you had work to do and then you had to write your exam. And I can't remember what you needed to pass, whether it was 60. I don't remember.
But you still had to be an intern. Like you're still working while doing this?
No, you do that before. So
so
you do your intern thing or your articling as it's called before. And then once you've done that, then you go and do the bar admissions course and then write your exams. Okay.
You write your exam and then what does somebody do?
So presumably you pass and then you're so-called called to the bar. And there's actually, it's almost like a graduation ceremony at that time. And I think it might still be there. It was at Roy Thompson Hall, and the Law Society of Ontario is the one that holds it. And that's when you wear your lawyer's robes. You usually get those for the first time, and you love wearing them then. Like later on, you're like, oh God, do I have to put that thing on again to go into court? But at the time, it's a big deal. And it's basically like a graduation ceremony. You walk across the stage and you become a barrister and a solicitor. So those like barristers are going to court and solicitor is non-court work. But if you pass the bar, you're both of those in Ontario.
Very cool. So you did that, and then you worked for a company?
I worked for the Crown Attorney's Office. That's where I started. That's where I articled as well. So I came back and I was an assistant Crown Attorney prosecuting criminal offenses.
Is that usually what people get like sign up for once they pass their bar? Not being like working for the Crown Attorney, but I guess doing whatever you did. Is it just the same thing?
Yeah, like a lot of people end up going back to where they did their articles. Okay. Not all. Some they don't get hired back, and some they don't want to go back. They want to do something different. So it really depends, but it's very common to go back to where you did your articles.
Do people just go and work for like law firms?
Yeah.
Is that common?
Yeah, that's very common. That's probably the most common. Like some people work in government like I did, but a lot of people end up going to law firms, and and there's law firms of all different sizes.
Got it. So it's pretty much private versus public?
Yeah.
Your decision? Okay, yeah. You went public?
I went public.
And then what happened from there?
I was a Crown Attorney for a long time. Like the first 16 years of my career, I was a Crown Attorney. It was great for me when I was having kids, is because I got like a year maternity leave. My salary was topped up to, I think it was like 92% of my regular salary. You couldn't get a better situation. And then when I went back to work, I was allowed to job share when my kids were young. So I only worked 2 or 3 days a week. And my salary was just prorated based on how many days I worked. And so it was a really great job for someone with a young family. And I'm always grateful for that.
That's amazing. I would have never known.
Yeah.
That's amazing for somebody to have that kind of security.
Yeah, it was great. And it was like once in a while, like if I had to go do a jury trial, which was part of the deal, I still had to do superior court work and jury trials. So I might have to work a couple weeks where I'm working every day, because you can't do a jury trial 2 or 3 days a week. You're there every day. But then I would just get what they called, days in lieu of. So if I had to work 2 weeks straight, then I'd get a bunch of days off to offset the extra days that I'd worked rather than getting paid. It was too hard for the government to be adjusting your pay constantly. So it was just easier to give the days off. And that was good with me anyway.
Nice. Did you take a lot of work home?
When I was a Crown, like I take a lot, now I do, but when I was a Crown, it was mixed. So if I was doing a jury trial, yeah, I would be working really long hours, either staying at the office late, or bringing work home. But if I was just doing like a regular trial, a regular list in provincial court, that's, like the lower types of offenses, you've got somebody who's got an assault charge or a theft charge or like that type of stuff. I didn't really usually have to work past 5 o'clock. So it was a nice balance.
Is it expected that you would take work home? after like your 9 to 5?
In the Crown's office or
In
generally?
general.
I would say generally it is. I mean, I think that being a lawyer is not a 9 to 5 job generally. And I think if someone's interested in becoming a lawyer and they're looking to work 9 to 5, they're choosing the wrong profession. I found the work-life balance was a little better in government for me. In private practice, there's definitely a lot more focus on billing targets. You know, you have targets usually that you have to meet. You have to docket so many hours a week, so many hours a month, so many hours a year, and it's like it's definitely more than 9 to 5 to meet those targets. And then there's just the demands from clients as well. Like, you know, clients have emergencies or what they think is an emergency, and you have to be responsive to that because at the end of the day, you're charging them a lot of money. So I think if you're like, oh, sorry, it's like 5:15, and I'm sorry you have an emergency, but I'll get back to you tomorrow at 9. You can't really do that in these types of situations. And then I think as well, like for people who are in areas like corporate law, again, I think if there's deals happening, you have to be available. So private practice, you're on call to some degree. You have to really find your boundaries and what's right for you, because some people have no boundaries. And obviously I think when you're young and you're junior, it's harder to have boundaries. You kind of have to do what you're asked to do. And if you're resistant to it, you're probably going to find you're out of a job. Whereas once you get a certain amount of experience and things, it's easier to have boundaries a little bit more, and be able to say no, or know what's truly an emergency that requires after hours work and what can wait till the next day.
Awesome. When you were working in the public sector, did you always have to accept the clients that you were given?
Yeah.
Even if you didn't believe their story or whatever the case is?
Yeah, absolutely. But what I liked about being a Crown was that you're supposed to be a minister of justice. So you're supposed to be doing the right thing. And so if you're given a case and you don't think that there's a reasonable prospect of conviction for whatever reason, like the complainant doesn't seem credible for a variety of reasons, or the defense has provided you with an alibi or something, you're supposed to, you should withdraw the charge. You should not be proceeding.
I made a mistake. I thought for some reason you were
the defense. Yeah.
So that wasn't the case. Although
I did do, when I left the Crown's office for a short period of time, I did do some criminal defense before I got into family law.
So to just be more simple for those who are listening, being a Crown attorney, are you the main judge?
You're not the judge, you're the prosecutor.
I see. Between the judge and the defense?
Yeah, so the defense is representing the person who's charged.
Yep.
And then you're not representing the victim, but you're kind of representing the victim.
Understood.
You're trying to prove that this person is guilty of what they're charged of.
Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't think they were guilty? And what do you do in those cases?
Well, then it would go back to the legal test was called a reasonable prospect of conviction. So if I didn't think I had a reasonable prospect of conviction, I had an ethical obligation not to proceed with the charge. But there's a difference between not having a reasonable prospect of conviction and somebody maybe you have some concerns, but it meets that threshold, because the Crown it's not their job to be the judge.
Okay.
The judge is the one who's so you don't just withdraw because there's a problem in your case. Like, there could be a problem, but maybe there's still a prospect of getting a conviction. It's a fine line.
Got it. I was thinking more of wrongfully convicted kind of scenarios.
Yeah, and there are people that obviously it does happen.
Yeah.
And as a Crown, I never would have wanted to be in that situation where somebody was wrongfully convicted of something, because you see situations of it. It does unfortunately happen. I think now with DNA and things like that, it happens less than it did many, many years ago, but it does happen.
There's a documentary on Apple TV. I had him on the podcast. It's called Outcry, and about a high school kid who basically was wrongfully convicted, and he spent a lot of years in jail and basically got out, was exonerated not too long ago, like maybe 10 years ago.
Wow. Was that in Canada?
No, in the U.S.
The U.S., yeah.
And he had a football career. He was hoping to get into the NFL and all that stuff. So it's crazy what that kind of things can do to your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even being charged, I mean, I don't want to get into my thoughts on the case because it's a controversial subject, but like the Canadian junior players,
Yes.
you know, like they were all acquitted. So technically they're found not guilty, but it's had an enormous impact on all of them, and their careers may never recover.
And I read a lot on it too, and I don't think the NHL will even, like Gary Bettman and all those people, I don't think they're
They
going
want
to
to touch
accept them.
them.
Yeah.
They
They're
just
blacklisted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you worked in the public sector, and then at what point did you want to switch to becoming a divorce lawyer?
So when I made the decision to leave the public sector, I initially did some criminal defense work because that was what I'd been doing, criminal law, just on the prosecution side. That was what I'd been doing. But I found that it just wasn't for me. The reality is most people are guilty. Like there's a small number who are, innocent and wrongly charged, but most people are guilty. And it's a different kind of lifestyle, like in the sense of, you have to go to the jails maybe on the weekend to visit clients, or you're getting those 3 a.m. calls where someone's been pulled over for impaired driving and you have to tell them to blow, into the intoxilizer machine and provide their breath sample and like that kind of thing. And I didn't want to have that kind of lifestyle and whatnot. So I started doing family law. That was the other area that had always interested me in law school, and I'd done a tiny bit of it way back. So I started doing that, and then I got more and more into that, and eventually stopped doing any criminal at all.
Can I take you just back? When people call you at 3 a.m. and you're getting out of bed, like, how do you wake up from? Like, how do you wake up? Do you have to like compose yourself before giving legal advice? Yeah,
I mean, usually those kind of calls are like. They're not complicated calls because somebody's been either, as you say, maybe they're being asked to provide a breath sample. So you're going to tell them, yes, you should provide the breath sample. Or if they're being charged with something, you're going to tell them not to give a statement, not to volunteer information up to the police. So the advice, it's not usually like super complicated advice. Although I guess in my experience, there could be a situation where it is.
How do they even have your phone number?
Well, if you either have it, advertised because you're looking for clients in business. I think that in the old days, people would be given like a phone book. Now I'm sure it's something online that they're given. I don't know. And also I was never something called a duty counsel. Often people who are arrested in the middle of the night, they are given the phone number for duty counsel by the police, and the duty counsel will give them advice.
And you're like, why did you give them my phone number? So do you have to answer your phone sorry.
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah. If you don't care about getting the business, you don't have to. There's no legal or moral, obligation that it's, someone calls you up at any time of day as a lawyer that you have to take the call.
How do you even bill them if they're like new people? Just, hey, I got caught, and you're already giving advice. Is that normal?
Well, with those types of calls, it would be. You'd have to. The advice is going to be free, but I guess the idea is you're hoping they'll end up retaining you down the road, and you'll make money from it. But that's a fine line when you're starting out as a lawyer as well. A lot of people really want to try and get free legal advice, and it doesn't often necessarily turn into a client, and you have to walk that line. Like, I'm much more selective now about giving any free legal advice. I don't do free consultations. I did once upon a time, and I found that they weren't a way of getting business generally, because some people will just go from lawyer to lawyer trying to get free advice and then do their own representation.
I have so many ways I want to take this conversation, but just to jump on that, do you feel like social media has helped you gain clients? And are you giving free information out on social media?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Social media has helped me get clients, and I provide a lot of free content to people. I have a podcast I do myself where we with a colleague of mine, Steve Benmor, and I also for many years had my own podcast called Divorcing Well. And there's a lot of content there, and then just in posts and things and articles I write on LinkedIn, and blogs. There's a lot of free content. So I feel like that's my way of giving out free information. And so if somebody wants to have a consultation with me, it's going to be a paid consultation generally.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
When you were in the public sector, did you ever get like death threats?
I did not, but I did have, there was a case I prosecuted where the guy was convicted of dangerous driving. He was up in Wasaga Beach and he had hit a pedestrian. It was like a busy weekend where there was people everywhere, and he'd hit a pedestrian and he'd driven, like, I can't remember the distance, but it was quite a distance with this pedestrian on the windshield of his car before he stopped his vehicle. And so he ended up being convicted, but he was like a young guy, no criminal record. He made a really stupid mistake, and I don't think that's a mistake everybody would make. Like, you might hit somebody accidentally, but you got to stop immediately and deal with the consequences of it. You don't keep driving.
Did he hide?
He didn't hide. He did eventually stop, but it's just that unfortunately he went this extra distance, and the argument was that caused further injury to the victim of it by being on, because he was hit hard. So when he was found guilty, and it was a jury trial, so when he was found guilty, he ended up saying, it was a number of years ago, but he said some disparaging things to me and was shouting, and the security in the courtroom had to restrain him and clear the courtroom and everything. That for me was the closest I ever came to somebody threatening me.
Is there any support systems for lawyers?
Like in terms of
protection when you're dealing with stuff like this?
There's security in the courthouses. So you have security when you're in court, but once you leave a courthouse, you're on your own.
Okay.
And when I was a Crown, if you didn't have to have your home address, for example, on your driver's license. There was things you could do to keep that privacy. And a lot of Crowns, because I'm still friends with a lot of people who are in the Crown's office, they're not active on social media and things like that. But they say that being a divorce lawyer is actually more dangerous than being a prosecutor. So and I don't have I shouldn't be broadcasting. I don't have security.
Yeah.
But the people are more heated in family law and divorce law than in criminal law.
So before we get into that, 2 questions. Why did you want to get into, I don't know if I asked you that, divorce lawyer, and what makes a good divorce lawyer?
So I got into it because when I was in law school, the only areas that really interested me were criminal and family. And it's because to me, they were about people.
Okay.
A lot of areas of law are just about documents and contracts and, think like corporate law, it's all about contracts and documents. I found that really boring. I liked the thing that it was about people. So if I wasn't going to do criminal law, family made the most sense. And so I started doing it, and then I found I enjoyed doing that more than doing criminal defense. So that's how I got into it more. And then in terms of what makes a good family lawyer, I think that you need to have good people skills, because you need to be, compassionate and caring. I might need to take a sip of water here.
Totally. Go for it.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, of course.
But you also have to know the law, obviously, and you have to be prepared. I think you have to have good client management skills, because people come in and they want what's fair. That's what all of them say. I just want what's fair. But what they think is fair and what their ex thinks is fair and what I think is fair and what the judges think is fair might all be different things. And so managing their expectations is important. And I think in family law, being resolution oriented is important, because a lot of people, they want to fight. But at the end of the day, if you have children with this person, you're going to be in their life, you're going to be connected forever, really. Even when your children are adults, you might have grandchildren together. You're going to be connected. So to go and fight and try and destroy the other party, how is that helpful to your children, and the fact that you have to have a relationship with this person?
So do you have any tips for those dealing with difficult spouses? I'm sure you obviously see it day in and day out.
I think that It's important to learn to emotionally regulate yourself so that you're not always just responding. So if somebody pushes your buttons, you immediately react and you're responding back, or you're immediately calling your lawyer. You need to learn to pause, and not everything needs to be an argument. Not everything is a call to your lawyer. And pick your battles, because there's some people out there, you know, it's the common term today thrown around a lot is a narcissist. Everyone thinks their ex is a narcissist, and some are and some aren't. And it's not for me to be diagnosing it. I'm not a psychologist, but somebody who has like an abusive ex who likes to trigger them, likes to push their buttons, if they just keep responding all the time, they're letting that person control them. And so they need to learn not to respond to everything, and to pause, and to pick their battles.
Does it ever emotionally drain you being a divorce lawyer?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very emotionally draining job, because you're dealing with people who are going through, if not the worst time in their lives, one of the worst times in their lives. They're in a very negative headspace. They're not happy. They're not happy they have to pay you a lot of money to help them with something. That people don't generally sock away money in case they need a divorce lawyer one day. And so it's very draining, because you have to hold space for all of this negative emotion that people have. They vent at you, they yell at you, not necessarily because they're yelling that you did something wrong, but they're yelling about what their ex is doing, or their ex's lawyer is doing, or what their ex's lawyer said. And so they're yelling, they're crying. And if you're compassionate and caring, like you obviously feel bad for them. And I'm very, like, I'm an empath by nature, so I kind of feel their pain. So it's really important to have things in your life that fill your cup back up, because it can be so draining.
Does everybody always need a lawyer?
I think most people are better off getting some amount of legal advice. I think that there's things people can do somewhat on their own, but I see people making a lot of mistakes when they don't get legal advice. And a lot of people don't want to get lawyers, obviously, because it's expensive. And there's a very common dynamic where it's often the husband will be saying to the wife, like, let's just come to an agreement. Let's not involve lawyers. They're just going to use up all our money. Like, let's just do this. And then he will try to kind of control, you know, the agreement and what's going to happen. And maybe that's been the dynamic in the relationship, where he was the breadwinner, he's the money guy, and has kind of more control over those types of issues, and feels that he can get his spouse to agree to something that's more beneficial to him than having the lawyers get in there and, you know, disturb that.
So how does somebody who doesn't have money to, I guess, defend themselves, are there support systems or like grants?
There's legal aid. So people who like have don't have assets and have a lower income could qualify for legal aid. And then from there, there's lawyers at different rates. You know, not every, like, there's lawyers who are maybe 150 or 200 an hour, and there's lawyers who are over 1,000 an hour. So you can find a lawyer who's at a rate that's more affordable. And then there's also divorce coaches out there now. So those are usually people who aren't lawyers, and they can't give legal advice, but they can help you kind of know what you need to go to the lawyer for, and they can help you manage stuff that maybe you don't need the lawyer for. So they can help somebody save some money. And then mediation is always a great option. People, at the end of it, you still have to get legal advice, but you could sit down with your spouse and a mediator and work out an agreement, and then just take it to a lawyer to give you the independent legal advice at the end, and that can save money as well.
So that's basically the way you would save money.
Yeah.
Do a lot of divorce lawyers or lawyers in general like offer pro bono or like charity, where they want to, like, have you ever been put in a situation where you really wanted to help this person, but they can't afford it?
Yeah. And I've done it a number of times, and I find those are usually the cases that come back to bite you. Okay. Unfortunately, like I find, when someone's tugging at your heartstrings and you end up, agreeing to help them and not charge them, it often, as they say, those ones just end up biting you, and you're like wishing that you hadn't done it.
Fair enough. Prenup and marriage contracts. Do you need them?
I definitely. I think they're not just something for the wealthy. They're not just something for people with second or third marriages. They're a great idea because it lays out at the beginning of the marriage what would happen if it doesn't work out. And the reality is 50% of marriages don't work out. So you're not being negative. You're being smart. And a lot of people, when they're getting married and engaged and dating and things like that, they don't want to have those difficult conversations. They don't want to talk about money. They don't want to talk about that type of stuff. And it's really important that you can talk about those kind of things, because a marriage isn't just, emotions and love and whatnot. It's a financial partnership, and there are financial consequences to being married to somebody. You end up having legally, you have certain financial obligations to that person. And so it's important, I think, to understand what they are and lay out, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, how do we want to have things dealt with? It's just a helpful conversation.
Are there any red flags if somebody doesn't want to sign a prenup?
I think there's a red flag if somebody's presented with a reasonable prenup and they don't want to sign. It's also a red flag if somebody presents you with a prenup that is so punitive to you. Like you're going to be with this person who's worth $50 million and lead this grandiose lifestyle. But if it doesn't work out, you're kicked to the curb and left with nothing. And they're walking away with all of that money. That to me should be a red flag as well.
Would that hold up in court?
If it's done properly, it would. If, there has to be financial disclosure. There should be legal advice involved that the parties each got independent legal advice. It needs to be in writing. It needs to be witnessed. But if it meets those criteria, it should hold up in court.
I'm dying to ask this one question. I see it all the time on social media where athletes put their property under their mother's name, they get divorced, and then that person doesn't ever get any of that money or real estate. Does that hold up in court?
It could. The spouse would probably try and argue that the mom was only holding it in trust for, the husband. And so it's not really in their name. But then they're going to have to prove that. So that automatically puts them, and it's probably going to be an expensive process trying to prove it. And there might not be a guarantee of success. So it can certainly pose a problem, but it may not be an insurmountable problem depending on the facts of the situation.
Very cool. What are some common mistakes you feel that couples or partners who are divorcing make during the process of divorce?
I think one common one is letting your emotions rule you. So you're upset, you want to fight. And so you end up running up a lot of legal fees because you're trying to fight rather than settle and come to something reasonable. I think people often involve their children, which they should not do. I don't care if you have adult children or children who are infants. They should not be involved in any way, shape, or form in your divorce. They don't need to know the details of what's going on and what your spouse did or didn't say to you or do. And a lot of people, they say they understand that, but then they do involve the children, and they want their children to not like the other spouse or decide with them. And it just puts the children in a horrible situation, and they shouldn't have to be there.
Is there a proper way to tell your kids you're having a divorce, or what's the best way to?
Ideally, the best way is for both parties to sit down with the children together, if you can do that, and explain it to them. It's going to be dependent on the ages of the children. Obviously, what you say to a 3-year-old is going to be different than what you say to a 13-year-old or a 25-year-old. So you have to make it age specific. And the important thing to communicate to children is that it has nothing to do with them, that mom and dad, still love them. Mom and dad will still be in their lives, and to answer whatever questions the children have, because they might be, well, where am I going to live? Like, what's going to happen? And you want to answer those questions and not make them feel uncomfortable to ask whatever those questions might be.
Do you decide, like, how does custody work? Is it negotiated?
It's negotiated. And so there's two aspects to the parenting formula. So one is what we call parenting time. So that's what the schedule is. It going to be, week about, which is where the children change homes every, Friday or every Monday, or is it some other 2-2-3 is a common one, 2 days with one parent, 2 days with the other, 3 alternating the weekends, or is it, so there's the parenting time, and then there's what we call decision making. And decision making is the term that actually is the old word for custody was the old word for it, but it's decision making, and it's decision making with respect to education, religion, health, and extracurriculars. And so it's very common nowadays for decision making to be joint or shared, that both parents make the decisions. But sometimes one parent really wants to have sole decision making, and unless the facts of their case really support that, they're going to have an uphill battle getting it.
2 questions. One, can someone just get up and say, I'm moving to another province? And how is that fair for the other partner?
Yeah, so theoretically, someone can do anything, right? Like whether they can do it legally is a different matter. So because there are people who just go and they move. And there's very clear law on relocation, is what we call it. There's procedures that are set out. So if you want to relocate with a child, you have to give 60 days notice, and it has to be in writing, and the other party has a certain time frame to respond. And then if they don't agree to it, then you're going to have to bring a motion in order to be able to relocate. It also depends on, like, if you have sole decision making for the child and the other parent, maybe sees the child sporadically, that in that kind of situation, you would need to notify them you want to relocate, but you don't need their consent. But if you have shared parenting, you either are going to need the consent of the other party, or you're going to need to get a court order. And what drives it is the best interest of the child, not the person who wants to relocate, but is this in the best interest of the child? Are they going to have a better life if you move to Pittsburgh? Does the parent have a job there? Is there extended family there? Is there a great school opportunity? And you also have to show how you're going to make time for them to have with the other parent. Are they going to get extra time in the summer? Are they going to get extra time at Christmas or March break? Are you going to pay for flights? How is all that going to work? And those are all factors that are looked at.
What's the duration of a motion like that typically?
Well, there's a lot of court process involved before it gets to the point of being actually argued on the motion. So and it depends on the status of the case. So if there's already a parenting agreement in place and you're wanting to change it because you want to relocate, you have to bring something called a motion to change, and then you're going to have to file documents. The other side has 30 days to respond, then they respond, and then you have a case conference that could be 3 or 4 months down the road. Then there's a settlement conference another 3 or 4 months down the road, and then eventually you get to the point of arguing it. If you don't have like an official agreement or anything, you would have to start by bringing an application, and then it's part of the application. And if it ends up going to trial on that issue, it could take like a year, 2 years to get to that point.
So someone can't just actually leave.
Well, some people do.
Okay.
And then in that kind of situation, so I've had cases where somebody has just unilaterally moved, and so then you would be able to bring an emergency motion. Like it's an interim motion, so it's not going to be a final decision, but it's an interim decision by court because somebody's gone and left without the other party's without notifying them or consenting. And courts do not like, and judges do not like, people who do what we call self-help remedies. So you going and moving unilaterally would be considered a self-help remedy. And I've seen people ordered back when they've done that. and a judge has no hesitation doing that. You may have signed a lease in your new location and all of that, but if you didn't follow the proper procedures, you could very well be ordered back.
Is an Amber Alert is best option for something like that?
I guess if you don't, yeah, if someone's left and you don't know where the child is, certainly an Amber Alert. Like if you know where the child is, then you're going to want to bring like an urgent motion, and that can be done in a matter of like a week or two. That can be done very quickly to get an order to get them back.
But like as a parent, emotionally, someone, your significant other or ex takes your kid. I don't have 1 or 2 weeks, and emotionally, I'm livid.
Yeah.
I feel like I would call an Amber Alert just to kind of trigger it, scare the other person. I don't know.
Well, if you have like a separation agreement or a court order that has a parenting schedule in there that's giving you parenting time and the other person is just up and left with the child, the police could also go and retrieve the child, and because it's in the order, and to enforce the order. So, and somebody potentially could be charged with abduction, especially if they like leave the jurisdiction. Like if they go to another country or something, then you're really looking at potentially child abduction, and there are cases where that charge gets laid as well.
Scary.
It is, and it's like the thing is too, like some countries obviously are harder to get a child back from, like, and so I've seen situations where dad goes with the child to like back to the Middle East, where women don't have to a country where women don't have the same rights, and they're not going to in those countries. A child is not going to be sent back. Those are really difficult situations, and people sometimes have very legitimate fears about that happening.
Interesting. What's typically the duration of filing for divorce, just from beginning to end, typically?
Yeah, there's no typical, because it depends on so many factors. So if the parties don't have children, for example, and they don't have a lot of stuff to divide, and the divorce isn't contested, and it's just a matter of filing a divorce application and the other necessary documents and serving and filing, that could take 4 months. But if there's issues, if there's property to be divided, child or spousal support issues or parenting issues, I mean, there's some people it goes on for years. So it's really, it's a broad spectrum. It just depends on how much conflict there is, and how much the parties are cooperating, and whether their financial issues are complex or straightforward.
Those who come to you, are they majority women or men, would you say?
I have both. Like I have both male and female clients. I find on the ones I get from social media, I think sometimes tend to be more female. But I definitely have I think just as many male clients as I do female.
What do you think some of the biggest reasons that people are divorcing these days?
I think a lot of it revolves, I think, around financial issues. I think that when people have different money styles or whatever, or that can be a problem. Obviously, there's the element. Sometimes there's cheating. That's an element, and then. But what I see also is just a common one, especially in midlife, is the parties just growing apart. They got married in their 20s. They're now 50, and children are older. And they're looking at this person, and they don't have anything in common anymore. They've grown in different directions, and they think, I still have a lot of life left to live, and I don't want to live it married to this person.
Fair enough. Is it harder to divorce when your kids are like toddlers or, 4 to 10 years old? I'm not saying it's easier when they're 18 plus, but when do you think is the easiest time to divorce when you have kids?
Well, for the children, I can speak from my personal experience. So my children were 1.5 and 3.5 when their father and I separated, and they don't really have any significant memory of us being together. So I've always thought it actually was easier for them, because their whole life they were going back and forth between houses and they don't know any different. So I think from that standpoint, like having them be really young can be, it was a benefit. It was hard on me at the time, having like a baby and a 2-year-old, or I guess I shouldn't say a baby because it was 1.5 and a 3.5-year-old. That was hard. That was a lot. But I see, you know, with clients and stuff, I think when kids are a bit older and they know what the family unit is like, it can be harder for them to adjust to the parents not being together.
Did you have a divorce lawyer? Were you a lawyer?
I was a lawyer, but I was a crown attorney, so
Okay.
I wasn't doing family law. So I did have a divorce lawyer, and even with people who are divorce lawyers, like I still would say they should get their own divorce lawyer because your emotions will guide you, and you need to have somebody who's objective, who can give you good advice, and you won't be influenced by your emotions on it.
Fair enough. Do you feel like your kids were impacted with the divorce, or?
I think they were, but I think that they were impacted as maybe little as possible. But I think if you were to ask them, were they impacted? I think they would say yes. And I think that if you were to ask them, do they wish their mom and dad were together? They would still say yes. But the research shows that what hurts kids the most is conflict. So if you stay together and there's just constant conflict, that's going to hurt your children far more than separating and divorcing and getting rid of the conflict. That's definitely what the research shows, that the conflict affects them more than anything.
Got it. Have you ever been in like not you personally, but situations where the other party is trying to just be so petty that they waste more money knowing that the other person doesn't have the money?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a form of financial abuse. Like you see it where one party has significantly more money, and so they constantly bring court motions and they try to exhaust the other party financially because they know they can't keep up with that, and that can be a real problem. And also the other situation that happens is you'll get one party self-representing, so then they don't have the legal costs, and they'll run up the legal fees for the client who does have the lawyer, and that can be a real problem as well.
With AI and ChatGPT, how helpful or how accurate do you think that resource is for those
self-representing?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be a helpful resource. You can't rely on it completely. Like I've heard numerous stories of lawyers using it to prepare a factum, and they call it hallucinating. Like ChatGPT hallucinates cases, so it makes up cases that don't exist, and they're in the factum, and obviously that's wrong and you can't do that. But AI is constantly improving and constantly refining. So I think at some point it'll get to a point where it doesn't hallucinate cases. And I do think the practice of law is going to dramatically change over the next 5 to 10 years. I think there's still going to be a role for lawyers to play, especially in family law, because people are emotional and they need, I think, the hand holding and also the strategy and I think there is definitely a role lawyers can play, but I think that how we bill is going to be dramatically changed, because right now it's the billable hour, right? We dock it for our time. And for me to prepare, for example, motion materials, it takes me several hours of work, sometimes more than several hours even, and I bill for that time. And because ChatGPT will be able to draft a lot of that type of stuff in the future, you just put in the prompts and it drafts something amazing. And it's going to take me, 5 minutes to do what might have taken me 5 hours. That's going to be, I think, how we bill is going to have to change.
I guess you will change to flat rate. But that being said, you have your own. Is it your own firm, or is it
no? I work at I'm a senior lawyer at a firm.
Got it. So, like, what are some of, because we have 6 more minutes. What are some of your goals that you hope to achieve as a divorce lawyer?
Again, I'm really motivated by helping people. So that's if I can help somebody, that, like, I know it sounds corny and people won't believe me, but that motivates me more than money. So I'm more about helping and having an impact. Right now I'm also, I've started teaching at Fanshawe College. They have a new program called the Family Legal Service Provider Program. It's essentially kind of a paralegal program for family law, and I really enjoy teaching in that program. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that as I go along as well. I find, like, I was talking before about finding things that fill your cup to offset the emotional drain that practicing family law can have. So for me, that's something that fills my cup and I like doing. Litigation is not my favorite thing to do. So I would like to evolve my practice to do less litigation and more out of court settlements and whatnot. But it's hard because there's a lot of files that still need to be able to go to court if necessary. So it's hard to kind of manage things that way. But that would be my goal, is to do less litigation, more teaching, and more out of court stuff.
Would you ever consider like starting your own YouTube channel and just like educating those?
Yeah, absolutely. I like social media, and it's been good to me. Like, I do get a lot of clients from social media, and I think it makes sense because when people are looking to hire a lawyer, if you're on social media, they can kind of get a sense of what you're like. They feel like they know you. They might trust you by what you're saying. You could seem knowledgeable, like you have expertise. And a lot of people are intimidated by lawyers. And so I think when you're on social media, they feel more comfortable with you because they feel like they know you. So you're less intimidating, which, can be helpful to getting new clients. And so, like, I think social media is a great way as well, just to provide information and educate people. And I always would see myself being on social media in, various forms.
Good for you. I think this is awesome. And I think in general, this episode is so beneficial for people who are just looking to get more information. I think it's great.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope your listeners find, some value in something I said, because I think at the end of the day, like, the reality is, as you said, like, half of marriages end up in divorce. So it's good to have some information about that. And there's lots of people, I find a lot of people are interested in being lawyers too. So hearing kind of the ins and outs of it can be helpful as well.
So to end on a lighter note, usually how I end the podcast, I ask 2 questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, if you can have any artist, dead or alive, perform at your wedding, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. Ooh, that's a tough one. Can it be a group?
Anything.
Okay, I would say the Beatles.
Okay.
Like even the deceased members come back to life. So I would say the Beatles. Performing at my wedding would be good.
Cool. And the last one is, if you can have anyone from your circle be on this podcast, who do you think would be a good fit?
Anyone from my circle? That's a good question. My colleague Steve Benmor is great. He's a family lawyer as well, but he also does mediation and arbitration, so he could probably speak more on those types of things as a mediator, arbitrator, and parenting coordinator. So I think he would be good.
Amazing, Steve. Okay, we'll look into it. Leanne, thank you so much for coming on. I honestly loved it. Time went by so fast.
It did.
And I just thought it was just so interesting. I've never been locked in like this before. Where can people find you on social media?
So my Instagram is at Leanne Townsend Life, and then I'm on Facebook, Leanne Townsend, LinkedIn, and then the firm I'm at is www.benmor.com, and so you can find more about me there as well. Perfect.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for Graham for having us here in the podcast studio.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.